Well, welcome to the fifth episode, I believe, of Into the Multiverse.
Yep. We're having a little change of pace today. Instead of doing our usual structure, we are going to do a little film review, a little film talk about a film.
First of all, we should probably introduce ourselves for anybody, on the slight chance that anybody is new to tuning in. I am Noah, and this is Judd. Say hi, Judd.
Hi, Judd.
Good job. That's the oldest trick in the book. Never use that again. I would also like to, we have a bit of a, something that we have to get across before we start. And one, this is a highly opinionated podcast. We don't necessarily claim to be experts on anything at all, so don't expect us.
I claim to be an expert on movies.
No, he isn't.
Well, there's a big difference between being an expert and claiming to be an expert. I claim to be an expert.
He claims to be an expert on movies, but do not hold him to it. And second of all, if you want to see There Will Be Blood, please do not listen to this. We are going to be talking about the movie There Will Be Blood, and there will be major spoilers.
There will be spoilers.
There will be spoilers all over this podcast.
But not until the very end of the podcast, just like the movie. No, we lied. Unlike the movie, there will be spoilers throughout. In the movie, the blood doesn't come till the end. That's spoiler number one.
All right, so
we're talking about There Will Be Blood.
If you are still listening right now, you do not care about spoilers, or you've already seen the movie. Okay, so Judd, what was your overall opinion on the movie?
I really liked this movie. I think that an extra disclaimer deserves to be said that this movie is like kind of dense in subject matter, pretty dense in subject matter, I think is a fair thing to say. But I really do felt like I thought I grasped a lot of it. You grasped a lot of it, right?
Yes, most of it.
And it was great, like very intense, very, shall we say, illustrative. Like it was excellent at painting a picture, of a character.
So, how would you rate it overall?
Well, what's the scale?
From 1 to 10, 1 being the worst, 10 being the best, the normal scale.
Well, it could be, let's do letters.
No, why would we do letters?
I like letters.
Okay, so from what letter to what letter?
A-.
Okay. Okay, I am going to use numbers like a normal person, and I will rate this a 9 out of 10.
I'll give it a 9 out of 10's high. I'm going to give it an 8.5.
Are we allowed to use decimals? I didn't know we were allowed to use decimals.
If you'd have just gone with letters, we could have agreed on A-.
No, there are less letters. Anyway, if we're allowed to use decimals, I would say an 8.7, which could be rounded up to a 9 out of 10.
I still go with 8.5 because there are genres that I like better than this genre. But all things considered,
I thought you liked westerns.
Oh, I do. I love westerns, just not as much as like neo-noir.
Huh. When I first started watching this movie, I really thought it was going to be something very different than what it ended up being.
What did you think it was going to be?
I thought it was just going to be a representation of how economics worked back in the late early 1900s in the oil trade business. My expectations were way lower, which probably merits why I'm rating it higher than you, because I had absolutely no expectations for this movie, and it blew me out of the water.
It's true. We started in the hot tub and or in the pool.
There was an oil explosion, and it blew me out of the oil rig and on into the water. And it blew me into the water.
and now you're deaf.
Yes, but that was I tried to make it like that, but then I can't remember what they called those oil things. So
Derek.
Derek.
It's called a Derek.
So I just went with rig. Thanks, BP.
See what you've done?
All right. So how were your expectations for this movie?
My expectations were actually pretty high. I had But I tend to, unfortunately, go into movies with pretty high expectations just because I like to watch pretty well-received movies just as a hobby. So I had pretty high expectations. But my expectations were in no way let down. Like, this movie was as good as I was led to believe it would be.
Was there anything that you think they could have done better?
Well, as we said earlier, the blood mentioned in the title doesn't come till the end. And
no, that's not true.
We're going to argue about that later.
Okay, so...
But I think, like, and this is going to sound a little infantile, but I think that a certain level of... there's a lot of grit in the first 3/4 of the movie, and that grit isn't really... like, it's just grit without any of the, like, tense violence of a movie genre that I would typically enjoy, you know, like, I'm trying to think of a good example, like Seven or Usual Suspects, both of which we'll probably talk about in future episodes.
Yeah.
Both of those movies are gritty and tense, and a lot of that tension is through a certain level of, like, very stylistic violence, which sounds bad. I admit that sounds bad, but when portrayed cinematically, it can be pretty artistic, and I don't think There Will Be Blood had a lot of that, you know what I mean?
Yes, I understand, but I think that this movie handled itself greatly.
I agree.
It had, the runtime was about 3 hours. I wish more movies got the attention this one did. I was watching another movie recently, the Walk Among the Tombstones, Liam Neeson movie, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like that movie much because it was also based on a novel. This movie is based on a novel as well, but it didn't get a long enough runtime as it should have. Into the Walk Among the Tombstones did not get a long enough runtime.
Into the Walk Among the There Will Be Tombstones.
Yes, it didn't get it did not get a long enough runtime, so it wasn't able to completely flesh out all of its characters, and by the time the action was occurring, you didn't really understand how much weight anything had. While in this movie, the characterization was amazing. With characterization, this movie excels completely. And the long runtime, although it can be slow at the beginning and lead you to believe that it's something else, gives it that chance to get really deep into each character and give each character their own personality traits and to flesh out who they are.
That's very true. And a thing that I think is very interesting about this movie that I think for other movies is a bad thing, but for this movie it was great, was there's basically one character in this movie. One main character, and all the other characters are playing second fiddle. You could argue that Eli Sunday is a main character, but basically this is a character film about Daniel Plainview. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes, pretty much.
And I think it excels at that a lot. Like it like you said, the long runtime can be a bit slow at times, but it makes up for that, more than makes up for it, I think, in how deep and how analytical and just like incredibly detailed they get in characterizing Daniel. Daniel Day-Lewis's character.
It doesn't necessarily start with Daniel, though, and that's the thing. The character at the beginning that it starts with isn't Daniel. Rather, it's the guy that died and his son, who is later to be known as...
The guy at the very beginning of the movie in the mine is Daniel.
I thought somebody died, and then Daniel came and picked him up, and then took the guy's child.
That's a bit later. Like, you know how the very, very first scene in the movie is a miner?
Yes, I remember that.
That's Daniel.
So, at what point does that transition into him getting a child? Him finding a child among the,
That's in 1902. Like, you know how the movie starts in 1898.
Yeah.
Then it transitions to
Oh,
1902. That's when he gets a child. Then it transitions to 1911.
I didn't account for the time skip enough. The guy at the beginning, to be fair, the guy at the beginning doesn't really look like Daniel at all.
He's covered in dust.
Well, he also has a much bigger beard.
Yeah, you're right. In fact, when I first saw it, I didn't think it was him, but it is him.
Okay, so it never showed when he actually found his adopted son HW.
Right. That's a pretty big spoiler, by the way.
Well, I did say there would be spoilers throughout this entire podcast.
Well, I'm just confirming.
Yes, Judd, that is a pretty big spoiler. I'm glad you noticed that.
Eli Sunday dies.
Shh. We'll talk about that. Maybe we can talk about that right now.
Okay.
So, who was the first blood?
I'm calling it was Eli Sunday. And I think that I'm saying it for two reasons. One, because everyone who died before him, there was no blood. And two, I think that the title of the movie is actually meant to be a joke for the director, or from the director. Like, There Will Be Blood is short for, there will eventually be blood if you just hold on, I promise.
But how I interpret the term first blood would be first death. Like, if you are playing, say, a shooter in there to say first blood, that means usually the first one that is killed. Which I guess you could apply to being Eli, but he kills somebody before that.
Yeah, you're right. So, here's what I'll say. I will say, first person dead, not Eli. First actual blood in the movie is Eli's blood.
But they kind of show inside of the brain of Henry. That is technically blood.
You're walking into a gray area here, Noah. I mean...
So how does the director and the writers characterize the blood? It's probably more, I think they tried to cover the gunshot wound, but they also had to show it so that they could show that Henry actually died.
Yeah, to make... so that there was no confusion over that. Yeah,
so
you're right.
I will say that Eli was the first blood, as in he was the first one killed, but with the term there will be blood, he wasn't the first one that showed blood. The first one that showed blood was actually technically Joe Gunda, because there was visible, like, blood mixed in with oil and dirt residue on his body.
I'd forgotten that. Alright, then let me put it this way. Eli Sunday, not first blood, but definitely most important blood.
He is the first one killed by...
Well, no, he's not. Henry's the first one.
Oh, what? No, never mind. I just brought that point up earlier, too, and I completely forgot. But he is...
the most important blood.
The first one that shows a significant amount of blood, and... if you consider blood out of the body to actually be blood, he is the first blood.
We get into the deep,
you see, because
gory logistics of blood.
Henry never lost blood.
Right.
As far as we saw, at least. And they only had to show the gunshot wound to confirm. Doesn't the book have the same title? I would assume that the joke would be applying to the writer of the book rather than the writers.
The book is just called Oil.
Really?
Yep.
Do you know
But it's with an exclamation point.
Oh.
Here, I'll pull it up.
Do you know if they share any similarities?
Barely any.
Oh.
I think the movie's inspired by the book, not based on it. I think.
Huh. That it doesn't register the exclamation part. The exclamation point in Google.
All right, let's see. Aha, Upton Sinclair's novel. Here we go.
It seems like the main character. Yeah, this doesn't seem like there is the same thing at all. It even says loose interpretation of there will be blood. There Will Be Blood is a loose interpretation of oil.
The main character is James Arnold Ross Jr., nicknamed Bunny, son of an oil tycoon. Bunny's sympathetic feelings toward oil field workers and socialists provoke arguments with his father throughout the story.
Yeah, that sounds not... I don't remember any socialism in this movie.
Although there was a lot of capitalism. Capitalism was a major theme.
Yeah. Would you say that the writers of the movie, like the same case in which the creators of Monopoly thought that capitalism was a bad thing, that they believe that capitalism is a bad thing?
I think that the director of the movie was probably making a very subtle pro-socialism standpoint. Because you have to remember, Daniel Plainview, the uber capitalist, eventually descends into madness and murder, which is not true of all capitalists, obviously. But I think that the director is probably making it like a very subtle anti-capitalist, or a reasonably subtle, I wouldn't say very subtle, a reasonably subtle anti-capitalist statement. But it's honestly less important, and it is more about the characterization of Daniel Plainview and his just this ruthless kind of power mad guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, basically the same thing that happened to Walter White.
Yeah. Very close.
I won't get into spoilers of Breaking Bad because this is not a Breaking Bad specific podcast, but I will say that they are similar in how they are carried out. Yeah. Although this one, of course, being a movie, the transition happens a bit quicker, and I would say that he may have been he had a bit of his screws loose at the beginning.
Yeah, that's true. He really did. Though not nearly as much. Like, if you think of that very beginning part where he's first talking to that group of people in what was it, Signal Hill or something like that. Like, he's really collected and very like normal. And then by the end, he's a raving madman who kills.
Well, I think when they showed him the first time, he was a cold businessman.
Yes.
Maybe not as bloodlust and ruthless, maybe not out for blood, but he was a cold businessman who reused speeches because he reincorporated the same speech when he went to New Boston.
Yeah.
Right? That's the name of the town?
Little
Boston.
Yeah, you're right. All right. I have a question for you then.
And what would that be?
Does the Daniel Plainview character have remorse? He's obviously ruthless. He's obviously murderous. But is he remorseless?
He is not remorseless, in my opinion, because you can see sometimes, and this is a great credit to the actor, you can see the subtleties in how he can feel, how he feels regret for what he does, especially when he sends his son off or he insults his son. His son was like his emotional outlet, and when he lost his son, that's when he started to lose it himself. He lost touch with himself and what he emotionally was thinking when his son went deaf, and he was so frustrated with his son that he couldn't be as emotional with him anymore, that he sent him off. He was no longer useful to him. So he does show remorse, but not necessarily for the right reasons.
I agree with you. I was gonna say that I disagree, and I think he's remorseless up until that last statement. I think he leans to the remorseless side, and the reason I say that is because all of the regret and or remorse, air quotes, that he feels is totally directed at his own selfish need for emotional venting or for power or intimidation or feeling bigger than other people. When he loses his son, HW, it's all about how he lacks this emotional outlet now. And when what was the farmer's name? Bandy? When Bandy when Bandy tells him to go get baptized, and if he gets baptized, he'll sell him the farm. When that happens, this whole baptism thing is all 100% about him getting the farm. He doesn't care one bit about how Eli Sunday is humiliating him in the church. For those that haven't seen the movie, there's a bit where he's getting baptized, and Eli Sunday, the priest who hates him, just like forces him to yell all these humiliating things, and he slaps him around, and it's a very interesting scene. And the whole time, Daniel is yelling all these things about what a terrible person he is and how he abandoned his son. He doesn't really feel remorse about any of those things. It's all for the goal of building the pipeline over the Bandy farm.
Yeah, he at one point when that amazing scene with the oil well exploding.
Oh man, we got to talk about that in a sec.
Yeah, and he says there's an ocean of oil under our feet, and then Fletcher, his associate, asks him, well, is your son okay? And he says no. But he seems overjoyed with the oil, the enormous amount of oil that is under their feet. He separates himself and from his emotions, but he does it so much because too much. Mm-hmm. Because he has the goal of getting rich and being able to do whatever he wants. And by the time that he's gotten rich, he's alone.
Yeah. It's a fascinating look into how he spirals into what essentially amounts to madness. Can I bring up the exploding oil scene?
Yes.
That scene is so cool. Like, you have to watch it. Go watch it now, in fact, and we'll wait. Okay, you're back. Did you watch it? So what did you think?
I don't think we should talk directly to the audience. Things just get awkward, and I have to watch you talk to the audience and just sit here. It makes me feel alone. I really don't like that, Judd. And can you formally apologize to me?
Hold on, I need to discuss it with the microphone. All right, what do you think? Should I? All right, I apologize.
Say it louder.
I apologize.
Get on your knees.
I abandoned my son.
Now, for those few of you that haven't seen the movie, that was a reference to a scene in the movie.
I bet they guessed that.
I don't know. It could just seem like we're spazzing out.
So there is a scene in the movie where they are drilling for oil and they hit gas, and it explodes out of the derrick, the rig, essentially, like a land rig.
Yeah.
And oh man, the scene is so cinematically brilliant. Like, the budget that went into that scene alone must have been huge. But the gas blows out of the hole all throughout the derrick, and then the gas catches oil, and so it's literally a tornado of oil exploding out.
And then it catches fire.
And it's a fire tornado.
It's a fire-nado.
It's literally a fire-nado.
Except it's not a tornado.
It's pretty much a fire-nado. And stay with me here. It skews a little bit because of a strong breeze, and it touches down over the ocean, and sharks come flying up through the middle.
And they're on fire.
It's an Inferno Sharknado.
Of course, Sharknado 3 coming out this fall.
Sharkferno.
Sharkferno. It's so bad. Why do you think Daniel hated Eli and his family so much from the get-go? Because you can see, obviously...
I think it's because Eli was smarter. He was astute. He knew how to get the money out of Daniel. He knew what the land was worth. And he asked for a $5,000 donation to the church.
Which he never got.
Right, he never got that. And I think that Daniel was so... I hesitate to say insulted, but for lack of a better word, I will say insulted, that anyone would even think that his money would go towards something so intangible as a church, you know? I mean, he was an atheist, pure and simple. No matter how much he referenced God and the will of the Lord, there's no way he was...
Yeah, he was definitely an atheist. Or
whether or not he realized it.
At least he didn't care for Christianity.
Which is very interesting because at the beginning of the movie, when asked what church he follows, he says, "I enjoy all faiths. I don't choose to pick one."
Yeah, when I saw that scene, I was kind of questioning it. I was thinking maybe he's an atheist, but then I matched it up with the timeline, and it didn't seem likely. But in the end, he was an atheist, as he told the priest to say that God is a superstition.
That reminds me, the priest did end up doing that. Was Eli really a devout Christian, or was he more in it for the money than for God?
I would say that he just wanted to be successful.
Oh, that's a good point.
He may have been religious, but seeing the stand-up comedies that he did in that church,
the whole scene where he's taking the devil of arthritis out of the old lady.
Yeah,
that's a pretty hilarious
how he
scene.
yells, and it kind of reminds me of Shia LaBeouf.
Also, interesting little subtle line. Daniel pats after Eli pretends to exorcise a ghost out of a woman, and thrust the ghost out of the doors of the church. Daniel comes and pats him on the back and calls his sermon a, quote, good show, which I thought was very interesting.
Yeah, it was just a great piece of stand-up comedy. I was expecting Robin Williams to come out.
He was just expecting, like, laugh track, and like, all of a sudden all the actors break the fourth wall, and, like, the camera recedes away to reveal a stage, and Eli's coming down, and he's, like, putting on a jacket, like, man, we sure had a great time filming today, didn't we?
And then it came up with the title sequence, and it says Saturday Night Live. Yeah, he even hated Eli's father because when he did not like how his father was beating Mary, or at least that's what I thought when it started off, but it seemed more like he was, one, doing a favor for his son, and two, just trying to call out the dad on his BS.
I think it was both. I think he was trying, because the girl's dad is sitting right there, and he goes up to the girl and he says, "You're not getting beat at home anymore, right? No, you're not going to get beat anymore." And he says this, like, real condescendingly right in front of the dad. So I think that it's speaking volumes about how he's kind of, for lack of a better way to put it, kind of trying to say, hey, man, I know what you're doing, and I mean, none of my business, but I'm just going to prove that I'm better and bigger than you by making you stop it, making you uncomfortable in front of your face.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think he had any sympathy for Mary.
Nah, I don't think so either.
That scene also segues into another subject, which is the cinematography of this movie. What do you think of how the film was handled cinematographically? I don't know how to say that.
Cinematically, I think
yes.
is the word. I think it was very good. Like, again, the whole exploding Derek and Fire NATO scene is just beautiful. And the colors of the whole film are very beautiful. Like, very, very cinematically aesthetic. I really like the Western feel. Like, it's the Western color. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Altogether, the movie was just, it blew me away.
Well, the biggest thing for me when I think of cinematography is actually the camera placement within each scene, because that has a huge effect on how you think of each scene.
At the beginning, it was really cool how they kind of placed the camera, like, in interesting little corner positions at the oil derrick. Throughout the rest of the film, it was pretty straightforward. There weren't any necessarily interesting camera placements, but honestly, the colors were so aesthetic and the acting was so phenomenal that kind of just took back.
But the reason I bring this up is because the reason that I said this was a great segue was because with that scene where he's talking to Mary and saying you're not getting beaten anymore, you don't know that he's sitting next to the dad at first.
That's true.
And then that was one of the subtleties that made me think the cinematography is handled quite well in this movie.
It was handled quite well. Yeah, it was the guy. What's the director's name again?
I don't remember for the life of me. His name was Christopher Nolan.
Was not
Definitely Christopher Nolan.
Do we not have
we had it pulled up, but I think you exited out of it.
I'm sorry.
But
Let's find out.
whoever he was, and there was another film that you said that he helped with, right? That he worked on, and it was, what was that movie called? The one that was about the guy becoming a porn star.
Oh, I've not seen it. I read it on IMDb.
Yeah, I know
literally tonight.
I know. I never said you saw it.
It is called.
It's not going to show it here. You're going to have to.
Paul Thomas Anderson is his name. Paul Thomas Anderson clearly knew what he was doing. The movie was called Boogie Nights.
And now that I see that it's not a direct adaptation, and how I believe he both directed and wrote for this movie.
He did.
I'm surprised he hasn't seen any huge success.
Yeah, this movie certainly was good enough to where I would watch another Paul Thomas Anderson movie if the opportunity arose.
It's probably because of the long runtime, which is unfortunate because I like movies with a longer runtime. But I think that the long runtime and slow pacing at the beginning drew a bunch of people away from it.
Could be. So, I think some ending remarks would just be, I don't
want to end it just yet. There's a big subject that I haven't gotten into.
Okay, well that will be our conclusion. What is your big subject?
Okay, so my big subject, and I'm surprised that you didn't see this. Maybe I'm just grasping at straws, but it was the references to the story of Cain and Abel everywhere. There were so many references to the story of Cain and Abel.
Describe.
You see Eli choking his father Abel, and then Eli's brother Paul is the fortunate son. He is Abel, and Eli is Cain, and Eli is another Abel when Cain, per se, Daniel kills him. Due to possibly his envy of Eli being so devout to a religion that he can't understand.
I never noticed that before, but yes, that's a good point.
I thought that it was just the biggest part of the movie. Maybe I was focusing on it too much, but the biggest part of the movie to me was seeing more and more of that Cain and Abel subject be brought up in each scene.
Yeah, that's true. I never noticed that, but that was definitely there. It's interesting to hear you bring that up like post-movie, and I can go back and now I have a reason to watch it again.
Yeah, I even when he says you're not the chosen brother, I thought of that as a huge reference to the story of Cain and Abel.
Yeah. So I suppose if I'm allowed to make a concluding statement, my biggest theme here was the fickleness of wealth. Like in the scene where the derrick explodes, it just struck me as so poetic that oil, practically the personification of wealth for Daniel, suddenly turns into this fiery destruction that, makes his son
deafens his son.
And burns the entire derrick and kills one of the workers. Like, this thing that is wealth and power for Daniel suddenly turns against him, and yet he still grasps onto it. And then his own son leaves to start his own business. Daniel's left alone. He's in this wealthy house. He's surrounded by incredible, vast sums of wealth, and yet he's still empty inside. That was the biggest theme for me.
Do you think that if his son didn't go deaf, that he would be happier with his large amount of wealth?
Yes.
Yes,
in some weird way, I think that is true.
So would you say that it was fated that he would have to lose his relationship with his son in order to acquire such wealth?
I think that's debatable.
I think that it was fated from the beginning that to acquire wealth, one way or another, you're going to have to give up something.
And he had to give up his son. Yeah, my goodness, this movie is just such an interesting commentary on one's devotion to wealth. It is an incredible character film and just an all-around a great movie. I'd recommend it to anyone.
Yes.
Except for small children.
I believe that does it for tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening in. This is Into the Multiverse, a special episode on the movie There Will Be Blood with Judd and Noah.
See ya.